In high pressure moments, boards are often called to judge not just decisions, but the discipline behind them. In this conversation with Al Williams, director of Hancock Whitney Corporation and author of the Directors and Boards article, Calm, a Framework for Leadership Under Pressure, we explore how directors can assess whether leadership is truly prepared for a crisis, how to separate signal from noise in fast moving situations, and how to ensure decisive action without drifting into short term reactivity. So, Al, your article for directors and boards argues that calm under pressure is not a personality trait, but a discipline leader's practice. From a board's perspective, how can directors evaluate whether a CEO or leadership team actually has that discipline before a real crisis tests it?
Bill, as I said in the article, calm is a state of being, and probably just to set the table, you almost can think of calm as being exactly the opposite of chaos.
Hmm.
You think about those two type of extreme, and really, what you're trying to achieve is really a structured way to think, decide, and act
Yeah.
as they go through, applying the methodology that I shared in the article. And really, what I'm trying to get to is when I talk about that, it is about centering yourself, assessing the situation, leading deliberately, and moving with purpose. Those things lead you to a very structured way to how to methodically work through whatever the pressures are, whatever the crisis may be at any given time. And so when you think about that's what you're trying to get your leadership to do, well, what the board can do to assist them in this area as they're thinking about, hey, do they have this level of discipline? Is really thinking about engaging with the CEO to really discuss and understand, hey, what are those key business risks that are known around your business?
Hmm.
The reason why you want to start there is because you can have an example. Those things could be operational, they could be financial. You can have things that people know is like cyber. It's a threat to your
Yeah.
business, along with reputational. And the reason why you want to engage the CEO is really then to be able to think through, hey, what is your thought process for how are we managing and mitigating that potential risk? So it's back to you want to be able to help and engage the leader to make his thinking visible and how he's going to go about approaching those things. How would they go about being very deliberate in making decisions? And then the actions they would take. You got actions that are taking to try to prevent an incident from occurring, and then you got the actions you would take in case of an incident would occur. And having that dialogue before an incident occurs is really where the board gets a chance to get a view into management's thinking and their logic and their methodology to addressing issues. And because this is very important, that's around, hey, how do you become practiced and proficient at understanding the risk and then being very thoughtful and deliberate in how you're going to manage and mitigate that risk.
Interesting. And so, as you broke down a little there for the folks, and as they'll see when they look at your article on directorsandboards.com, Calm here is a framework, right? And one of the steps in that framework is assess the situation. That's the A in Calm here. It includes separating real risks from noise and identifying what decisions are reversible versus material. In the boardroom, what questions should directors ask management to help clarify that distinction during what's going to be a fast moving situation?
Oh, absolutely. You have those things occurring, you could say almost daily. They don't necessarily always rise to the level that you requires the board to be involved. But when they do, the things that I found helpful to me and in my dialogues when I was in one of those executive roles and engaging with the board, and that
Yeah.
I find even now when I'm in a board capacity is really let's first make sure we understand the context of the issue uh, and the magnitude of it. So some of the questions the board can be asking is really one is understanding, hey, what area of our business is this impacting, and what is not only the current impact, but what's the potential scale of the impact and for how long. So you want to understand the order of magnitude. And the other question that a board would ask that will follow up to that is really getting a sense for, hey, is this something that the management team, have direct control over in regards to how you respond and addressing it? Or is it something that may require government involvement or third-party services, because the nature of the issue that a company may have to deal with may not necessarily be all within their control. So that's the other element that you're calibrating to get a sense of how deliberate the board can be, or to what level they may have to partner with other stakeholders to actually address whatever the issue is at that time. And third, it really is a case of understanding what is the potential impact to the company's reputation and its shareholders. Because as a board, you're trying to make sure you understand what's the potential impact to your shareholders' interest, given the nature of the issue, and you want to get a sense of that sooner rather than later. And then the board can really play a role in truly now leveraging the expertise that board have. Most boards quite diverse. Most of the boards have people who've had lived experiences in dealing with crises and others. And that then allows the CEO to be able to tap into various board members who may have dealt with similar challenges, or the board members able to point to additional resources that the CEO and the leadership may not be aware of that can help them to be able to address that challenge.
Interesting. As you said earlier, and as I pointed to a degree, one of these are fast moving issues. So one of the things that jumped out to me when reading the article is this idea that calm leadership doesn't necessarily have to mean slow leadership. In fact, it can't when you have to move that fast. So once direction is set, leaders, they have to move with purpose, which I believe is the M in calm, right?
Yes.
How can boards ensure management is acting decisively during a disruption without pushing the organization into what could be a reactive, sort of short-term way of decision making?
What I would, in looking at this particular area, moving with purpose, I think the opportunity for the board here is really be a source of calm for its CEO and the leadership team. And what I mean by that is really, as they're engaging with the leadership team, ensuring that they are relying on discipline in their approach versus adrenaline and how they are addressing that issue. So the board, and this is where we sometimes find ourselves having to make sure that we don't get pulled into wanting to be the crisis management team, because all of us have been in that CEO's or the executive's role before. So you have to be very cognitive of you're wearing a different hat.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you perform the board role and not try to perform the leadership role when you're dealing with the crisis. And part of the way that you could be helpful in ensuring that they continue to move, being very deliberate and being able to make sure that they're moving with pace, is really, providing them the support they need. And this really gets around to understanding what the crisis is and making sure that the CEO has truly thought out what are the clear objectives that they want to be trying to achieve in addressing this particular crisis. For example, if you got a operational plant at one of your facilities, there was a significant safety incident. What would the company be trying to do? And is that your largest facility that generates the most revenues for your companies? Being clear on what are going to be your objectives as you face that incident. So you can imagine for the people on the ground, their focus is going to be around, hey, let's make sure that we, the safety of all of our personnel. We're going to make sure that we contain the incident. And then subsequently, you want to get to the point of now beginning to look at now, how do you stabilize your operations around that particular incident before you look at, learning what caused it and then potentially putting your facility back into service. Well, as a board, you have to be very mindful of the tactical things that are having to be taking place during that instance versus the bigger things that you could be helpful with the CEO, because you got people on the ground handling the tactical. Then you have to widen your aperture to make sure that we think about what are the potential reputational issues, what things that is it contained within that perimeter fence of your facilities, or is there community impact? And this is where you want to make sure your CEO is continuing to maintain a macro perspective around those incidents, because there are other external factors that can come into play. and the board can be a partner with them, making sure they're thinking ahead around these other things that we have to be able to manage and maintain a level of business continuity at the same time to try to mitigate the overall impact that that particular incident may have.
And now we're going to end. I was going to say that we're going to exit out of the idea of calm leadership, right? But this question is probably completely connected to the idea of calm leadership. Before you were a public company director, you actually played high level college football at Ole Miss, which I find incredibly intriguing. So, what would you say you learned on the football field that then helped you as you became a successful director? Or are there commonalities? And of course, does the calm leadership sort of tie into what you experience on the football field?
It does, and Bill, I see you already testing my calmness because you said I played for my arch rival Ole Miss versus Mississippi State. So Mississippi State
I was
University.
given bad information, so I'm
See,
glad we're
I,
on.
I,
I'm glad we're
I
online here, so you can't reach the.
see that's a sign of calmness. I didn't react to you needling me about my arch rival in state during my college days, but I actually owe a lot of my own success to those early formative days when I was back in college. And you can imagine playing sports in the Southeastern Conference. I always get a chance to tell people, my only claim to fame is that I played against the Emmitt Smiths and the Brett Favres back in that time. I wasn't successful against them, but I did play against them. Now, when looking back at it, there are so many parallels between playing high level competition as I did back then to the corporate world and leading companies as well as to the boardroom. There's 5 things that come to mind for me. If you think about the parallels, strategic planning. Well, in football, you had to think about, hey, you need to understand the competitive landscapes. You had to know who your competition was, understand what they're doing in the space that you're going to be competing in, and you had to think about then, how am I going to game plan against them?
Yeah,
Business will have to be thoughtful about. They got to understand the landscape in which they're competing in, and then how do they go about being successful in that landscape. Then second, you got to think about execution plan. Now you know the strategy you want. Now, how do I go about executing that strategy? And in football, you can imagine that's what all the practice was about. The practice was really about, hey, understanding the schemes, understanding the risk, and then thinking about how you can exploit the opportunities that relative to your opponent. In this case, it's really how do you go about capturing in the business world, how do you go about capturing more market share and to be able to continue to grow your business. And you want to be able to plan where you're going to be able to do that and what adjustments you need to make to be able to be successful going forward. Third is the execution. At the end of the day, it does come down to you got to perform. And with that performance, there's a level of accountability and delivering results behind the individuals you choose to put on the field or the individuals you choose to lead your business and your company or be directors over your company as well. And fourth, you got to be willing to learn and improve, not only just from your success, but also your mistakes. You got to have a high level of self-awareness. You got to be able to do through self-assessment and be critical, because that's the only way you keep getting better, because the competition is constantly getting better. And last but not least, and probably what ties all of this together when you talk about success, it's teamwork.
yeah,
You've heard the teamwork makes the dream work. In this case, it's absolutely true. In any company or on any team, you're only as good as the entire team. It's about how do you do things for the collective good of the whole versus the individual. And so that means you may have to wear different roles. You may have to adjust, you may have to adjust how you're delivering things. You may have to get substituted and put someone else in to a position at different times. But that's what you have to do for the betterment and for the success of the entire team or the entire company. So I feel that I was so well prepared unknowingly for taking on the corporate world that existed ahead of me. And it really felt second nature as I moved into the corporate world from my early days all the way up to management. And I still find that those lessons from then to now are still applicable every day, even in the roles I'm performing today.